When we write music for the orchestra, we need to be able to write and read for transposed instruments, and there's also some instruments out there that actually play an octave higher or even 2 octaves higher than written, or an octave lower than written. So first let's check out those instruments, and after that I will explain how you can read and write for transposed instruments, for example French horns and B-flat clarinets. Let's start with the Octave Shift instruments, and here we have our piano, which sounds right, it's the correct pitch. So let's start with glockenspiel, and glockenspiel actually sounds 2 octaves higher than written. And you even can't hear this right now because it's way too high. So let's bring this down an octave. So this is actually C4. But as you can see right here, if the glockenspiel plays this, it's a C6, E6, G6, C7. So it actually sounds 2 octaves higher than written. And why is this? Well, if we need to write this 2 octaves higher, it becomes really frustrating to read, and that's why they write it like this, 2 octaves lower. Now another example of 2 octaves higher is crotales. But I don't have any samples for that, so that's why we are hearing piano. And as you can see right here, our C4 is actually a C6 playing. The same as with the glockenspiel. So keep in mind, glockenspiel, crotales, 2 octaves up, sounds 2 octaves higher than what you write. Now let's take a look at the instruments that are 1 octave higher. And a very well-known instrument is our piccolo, and we often see this together with our flutes. So when they play something similar or the same part as our flutes, they actually don't play the same part because the piccolo sounds an octave higher than written. So normally this is our C5 note, and as you can see right here, C6. Another example is xylophone. So let's bring our piano an octave up. As you can see, C5 actually is a C6 on the xylophone. So keep in mind, 2 octaves up, glockenspiel, crotales, 1 octave up, piccolo and xylophone. Okay, now let's look at the instruments that actually sound an octave lower than written. And one of the most common instruments are the double bass. And they often play the same part as the cellos, but keep in mind it's an octave lower actually than written. So they usually play the same part as the cello, but an octave lower. So for example, now let's add cello part so we can easily listen to this. So as you can hear, it's written the same, but the double bass sounds an octave lower. And if we play this together, you can hear they play the same part but with an octave difference, with a distance of an octave between them, you know. Okay, so Octave Lower, double bass, but this is also for, let me check this out, I've written this down on paper. Double bass, bass oboe, contrabassoon, bass flute and bass trumpet are all sounding an octave lower than written. Okay, so now let's move on to the tricky part of this video, and that's our transposed instruments. Let's start with the B flat clarinet, for example. Here we go. Okay, right. So if I play this part, now this is in concert pitch, so it means that it's not, this is how the real pitch would be. Now in most scores we actually see the transposed pitch, so that means that if a B flat clarinet player is playing this, then it will sound like the piano part. So right now we see it's actually D major. It's also changed the key to D major instead of C major, and it sounds the same as. Now this might be tricky in the beginning, but you need to keep in mind, so from a normal instrument, which is a C-pitched instrument, the B flat clarinet is actually a whole tone lower than C, so from C to B flat is a whole tone lower, and in order to compensate this whole tone lower, we actually need to write all the music for the B flat clarinet one tone higher. And in order to do this, we need to make sure two things happen. First of all, if we write, so as you can see right here, for the piano we have written C, E, G, C, which is just like a C major chord. We need to take this a whole step up, a whole tone up actually, and then we would get D, F sharp, A, D. And that's the first part, so we need to shift everything one tone up, but we also need to shift our key signature. And in order to go from C major, one whole tone up is D major, and that's why our key signature here is actually D major. So if our instrument is a whole tone down, so it plays, if it plays a C, it actually is a B flat. We need to compensate it in the other way around. We need to shift it up one tone. And this might be confusing in the beginning, but also if we, the other way around, if we need to read this part, we know that it's a B flat clarinet, we need to think one tone lower than written. So we see D, F, A, D. We just need to bring this down in our mind, of course, so it becomes like this. Now there are other instruments out there that are transposed as well. For example, an A clarinet is also something you might encounter. We can start with the key signature first. From C, we need to go a minor third higher, which is E flat major, and E flat major is 3 flats in the key signature, as you can see right here. And if we need to write the same chord, we just need to think 2 steps higher. So if it's a minor third or a major third, it doesn't actually matter that much. If you need to think about it, just think 2 tones higher, because our key signature will actually compensate the minor third or major third or whatever. What I mean is, if you write for an A clarinet, just think 2 steps higher. So from C to E is 2 steps higher, but it actually needs to be a minor E, but our key signature will actually do that for us. Another example is our French horns, and French horns are actually F. The French horns sound a fifth lower than written, so this means we need to write a fifth higher than written, and a fifth higher from C major is G major, and that's why we have one sharp in our key signature, the F sharp, which means it's G major key signature. And if we need to write for French horns, we need to think a perfect fifth higher. So if I write a C, it's gonna be a G, B, D, G, and it sounds the same as. And the other way around, if we need to read this, we just need to think a fifth lower. So G becomes C, etc. Now this can also be the other way around. For example, we can have an E flat clarinet, and that's actually pitched higher than it should be. And in that case, we just do the opposite. So if we play a C on an E flat clarinet, it actually plays the notes minor third too high, and that means that we need to write everything a minor third lower. So instead of a C major key, we need to write everything a minor third lower for an E flat clarinet, and that's in A major. And also if we need to write our notes, we need to think A, C, E, A. And actually it's a C sharp, but our key signature does this for us. And if we need to read this, E flat, so it plays it higher than written, just think 2 steps up and the key signature will do the rest for you. Now another instrument out there that is actually a perfect fifth lower sounding than it should be is our English horn. So French horn, English horn, which is totally different instrument by the way, both a fifth lower than they should sound. Now if you write for saxophones, it's actually a bit trickier because our alto saxophone and tenor saxophone are transposed instruments, but they also sound an octave lower than what's written after being transposed. Let's say we have our alto saxophone, which is an E flat instrument, but we also have our clarinet E flat here. It doesn't sound the same, and I will show you right now. So as you can see, this is our C, E, G, C part right here. Should be like this. And this is our saxophone. As you can hear, it even sounds an octave lower than our E flat clarinet. So why is this? Because the ideal range of the saxophone is actually an octave lower than what we write here, and it's just easier to write it an octave higher. Actually, it's not written an octave higher than what it sounds, it's a major sixth higher than what it sounds. So for example, if we look at this, our A is actually a C4, and this is our C4. So as you can see on the piano part here is our C4, and a major sixth higher is where we need to write it for an E flat saxophone or alto saxophone. same note. And with the E flat clarinet, it's just thinking 2 steps lower than our C, as you can see. So that's a bit tricky. The same is for our tenor saxophone, and probably some other saxophones out there as well. So just keep that in mind. A saxophone is actually, especially an alto saxophone, is a major 6th lower sounding than what's written. And yeah, that's it for this video. If you still have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And of course, as always, I hope to see you in the next video.